one of the wonderful things about music is that it's by and large pretty universal. When almost any culture will perceive a minor chord as something that feels sad, and even my 4-year-old can identify that as, oh, that's sad. But there are more subtleties, of course, too, and that may affect instrument choice, it might affect tempo, and it might affect chord progression.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jody Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. This is the second part of my interview with Eric Singer. What's your typical way of working with ad agencies to make sure that they have all the information they need to present what you're apparently not going to be there to present?
Yeah. So back in the before times, gosh, I swore I wasn't going to mention the pandemic.
I have called it that too. Yes. The before times. Yes.
In the before times, we would try to present creative in person as often as we possibly could. And that wasn't all the time. We're in Colorado, so most of our clients are not here. But if it's a big project, we'll fly out and present in person. But these days, obviously, that's not an option. So we end up presenting in a virtual format. And I've found that the way I like to do that is to get on a Zoom call or a Google Meet and walk through each one of our demos with the agency or the client. Tell them, here's what you're about to hear. You're going to hear this instrument featured. Here's why we did that. Oh, hey, and we also did a mock-up of your TV spot with some local voice actors so that you can hear the music in context. Here comes that demo with the context, and then you'll hear the music on its own right after that.
I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
When you do that virtually, are people hearing what you hear if they're hearing it over Zoom?
No. So what I learned that lesson in
that's a
real
big one.
quickly. In the very first time I tried to do it. The Zoom or Google Meet or whatever you're using is going to degrade the quality. So
Totally.
So what I do now is send them a link in the chat of the meeting.
Oh, that makes sense.
And
Yeah.
say, hey, so make sure ahead of time, I tell everybody, make sure you have headphones for this presentation, and I'll do my little spiel, and then I'll shut the hell up and ask them to click on the link that's in the chat, and then we'll talk about it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Because I mean, you want the audio to shine as much as it possibly can, and it's hard to do that over Zoom.
Boy, is it. It really is. Although I will say that one benefit of that is that sometimes we'd find ourselves presenting in, an agency conference room or something that had really shitty sounding speakers, and that obviously doesn't do your work any favors either. And by presenting virtually these days, we can tell people, hey, please have headphones. Most people have fairly decent headphones, and at least it's a more controlled environment to listen in. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not terrible. And I think whenever we do have to go through this process with an agency that then is going to turn around and present the work without us, I try to just give them all of the stuff that I've talked about during the presentation in an email afterwards. And a really good creative team or account team is probably going to do a better job of presenting than I could anyway. They know their client. They're used to doing this, and they may be aware of the childhood traumatic piano lessons or whatever. But I'd always at least want to be in the room during that presentation. Doesn't always work out, but I'd like to at least be there, if no other reason than just to answer questions that might come up.
Makes sense, yeah.
There are some other players in this space, companies like us who do sonic branding, who don't work with agencies in that capacity. And I fully appreciate why they would do that. But for us, that model wouldn't work. Like I said, our biggest single category of client is ad agencies, and we've always worked really closely with agency people, and we just really enjoy it. I love talking about the fact that one of our original founding partners at Coupe, Patrick Culley, was a full-on rock and roll legend. He was the tour manager for the Rolling Stones. He managed and co-wrote songs for the Eagles, like top of the heap as far as that line of work goes.
Mm-hmm. Is that why you guys started a sonic branding division at Coupe?
Well, so it's interesting because, Patrick and Scott founded the company, and they, it was originally just a recording studio for musicians to come in and record. And then a local bicycle shop here in Boulder asked Scott if he could write a jingle for them. And that kind of started us down this path. And so I guess, when you go back to the Jingle days, this was, I think, 1979, nobody was using the phrase sonic branding, but of course that's what it was.
And jingles are awesome for helping
jingles
with
are
memory.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love me a good jingle.
I mean, they kind of have gotten this reputation now for being like kitschy.
Yeah.
But I mean, they worked. That's the thing, right? And now we're trying to like backtrack and figure out, now what do we do without jingles?
I couldn't agree more. Like, I think we in advertising get so caught up sometimes in chasing awards, doing the most creative work we can, doing the most groundbreaking work we can, doing the most inspirational.
If it's not memorable, that's a failed commercial.
Exactly. I think we sometimes forget our job is to sell things, move product, and there are few things more effective than a good old cheesy ass jingle to do that.
How do you make that authentic? That's because that's the buzzword right now, right?
Yeah.
Authenticity. So, how do you make a jingle authentic is really what is coming up now, I guess, with people trying to figure out, okay, well, we can't do jingles. We can't hire this big, celebrity to sing this song and, modify it to use our product name.
Right.
But so what do we do now?
Yeah.
What do we do now?
To me, the issue of authenticity is kind of our easiest thing at Coupe to fall back on, because it's like that's exactly where we came from. You want legit music. That's what we were founded on, and then we just sort of discovered along the way that we really, really enjoy applying that authentic creativity, that art form of creating music and sound to advertising. And that's Patrick, the Rolling Stones and Eagles manager. He ended up leaving rock and roll behind. He loved the experience of working with ad agencies on advertising so much that he left it all behind and went to go work at an ad agency. And he just retired after 20 some years with Ogilvy. Not a super typical career path, but it always
not.
Cracks me up when I see a job posting looking for a rock star creative director. I don't know if they make those anymore, but he was one.
Yeah. That is actually pretty funny. But yeah, I can understand the allure. I can. As a voice actor, if I really wanted to, I guess I could go into animation and video games, but I've always been drawn to the advertising, the marketing. Like, that's always really making other people money is actually kind of fun.
It is.
It's like a personal, like a challenge, Yeah. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I do too. It's there is something really special about each one of our composers in that all three of them are insanely talented musicians. And I almost hate to use the word talented because it implies that there's just something inherent in them that makes them better at what they do than the rest of us.
Practice a lot too, exactly. I'll bet. Like that's, talent's only like 10%.
Right. They are all hugely talented, but above all else, they work their asses off at honing their craft.
Yeah.
And they all have this love for bringing their own take to somebody else's vision, and that's what it's all about. Can
Can I just say that I love that they're actually making money doing what they love to do?
Yes.
Like, this whole starving artist thing should just go away.
I couldn't agree more. We see it here constantly because our business model is essentially during the day, Monday through Friday, we're working on sound and music for advertising and films. And at nighttime is when we open up the studio to independent musicians to come in and record at a much lower rate than what an agency would pay. So we're still in that world of independent musicians, and it is it's really sad to me that a band who's coming in and recording with us tonight, they've got a gig this weekend, and they've got 7 members of the band, and that gig is going to pay them $800 or something, which is about what that gig would have paid 30 or 40 years ago. There's just artists are only getting more starving.
It's harder for anyone to do anything right now. All online,
totally.
A lot of it is local, but even like the venues are like at half or like less capacity. And then, it's just a nightmare for a lot of artists right now.
It is. But, I think it also presents an opportunity to pivot the business model of independent musicians, whereas the goal used to be, let's get a record deal. Now that's almost meaningless.
Oh, yeah. And it hasn't been that way for a while, actually.
Totally. You're so right.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers, and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast. I had a website called The Muse's Muse, which was on for a long time, from like 1995 to 2016. And it was basically a songwriting resource. So I spoke to a lot of people who were trying to make this a living. And I saw Napster. Like, I actually saw the decimation that it caused and watched the industry tank.
Totally.
It's been a really interesting study to see how people are doing their best to make a living now. And I think the way they're doing it is becoming influencers online. Like, that's really the only way that they can manage to make any money at this point. It's
You look at the career path of somebody like Lil Nas X, where that's exactly as you describe. He just worked social media to his advantage. He became an influencer, and now he's what is his title? I think Chief Culture Officer for Taco Bell. And I think
good for him.
That's the new record deal. Is
a big advertising,
a big placement.
Yeah, because they pay.
They do.
That's the thing, right? Like, no one else is paying. And the big record labels are like all into like Spotify, and that pays the artist cents on every play. Like, it's crazy. Yeah.
It really is. It's a whole new world out there. But I think the plus side of that is that there's so much content, not just advertising, but podcasts and streaming video, whether it's advertorial or just entertainment stuff. There is so much content that needs music. There are infinitely more opportunities to get your music heard through a non-traditional route, like, whether it's being in a corporate explainer video or it's, the opening credits of a new must-see TV show. You've got more chances for more people to hear your music than ever before.
Yeah, there are a lot more mediums.
Yeah. you're just competing in a pretty saturated marketplace.
Yeah,
to say the
unfortunately.
least.
Yeah, there are pros and cons. It's tough.
No
It
doubt.
is really hard out there for musicians. I do not envy them.
It is, but one of my favorite things about this job is being able to connect bands with brands. That rolls right off the tongue. That should be a bumper sticker or something.
Ooh. It
But
rhymed.
connecting artists with people who need independent music is incredibly rewarding. Especially given our sort of unique business model where we've got independent musicians in here every night and we're working with organizations every day. We have a lot of chance to connect people together, and that is for me incredibly rewarding. We're doing something right now with
I was going to ask, do you have
yeah.
any examples of this right now? Yeah, that would be good to hear about.
We're working to negotiate a deal between the Gill Foundation, which is an organization, a nonprofit that works with LGBTQ plus people to support them in various ways, and to so we're working on connecting them with an artist who can embody their values and help them get their message out to people who need to hear it. And they're every week there's something like that where we're getting to make these connections and help brands find artists that can embody who they want to portray themselves as.
And it's good. It's a great opportunity for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So are you working on anything in particular now that you can talk about?
Yeah.
I mean, besides, a whole audio branding spectrum thing. Yeah.
So right now, we are working on a campaign for a large European confectionery, I guess you'd say. It's a candy maker. They make a bunch of candies, and those are sold all around the world. And we are currently we've done various theme songs for them and jingles and shorter form sonic branding pieces, and we're currently localizing something. So we created essentially a short jingle in English for the US and Canadian markets, and we're now in the process of localizing that, which is one of my absolute favorite things to do because it just lets us geek out on such a bigger pool of data.
How do you do that exactly?
Yeah. So we have a few great partners in the translation and localization space. So we don't have any translators on our payroll, but we partner with some really, really great ones. And then we also bring in whoever we might need. So on a project of this size, we bring in a strategist who's going to work with us to talk about sort of be the conduit between the strategy team at the agency and our own composer team. We want to really geek out and drill down and talk to the people at the marketing office in each of these countries to find out more about their market, what their challenges are. And in some cases, we might make no changes to the music. It may be simply a matter of translating the lyrics into the local language. But that's almost never going to be a straight translation. There's so much more to factor in. The cultural context, rhyming schemes, all of that factors into it. So we'll go through a few rounds of back and forth with translators, and sometimes we'll work with voiceover coaches who focus on a specific language, and we try to make it a pretty big party where we get input from anybody who has something valuable to bring to the table.
Do you ever change the music, like the actual instruments you're using, or the beat,
Sometimes
or whether
we
it's
do.
major or minor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes we do. There are, one of the wonderful things about music is that it's by and large pretty universal. almost any culture will perceive a minor chord as something that feels sad. And even, my 4-year-old can identify that as, oh, that's sad. But there are more subtleties, of course, too, and that may affect instrument choice. It might affect tempo, and it might affect chord progression.
I only raised the point because I know that MasterCard just recently was doing that as well, and they did a whole musical spectrum for the world, basically. That was very, as you were saying, localized to each geographical area, and they changed. I mean, it was the same notes, but they changed the way that they were presented. So different beats, different musical instruments that were more focused on where they were being heard, that kind of thing.
Totally.
And, yeah, there's also the thing of and again, I wanted to ask you about this if you ever work this into what you're doing as well, because a lot of these are being heard on different mediums at this point, right? Like they're being heard on Google Home or Alexa, they're being heard on your phone, or they're being heard out of your computer speaker, or they're being heard in a large auditorium, or on the television, or on the radio, and all of these different places. Like, do you think about how that sound sounds when it comes through these different locations?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be dead in the water really quick if we didn't, particularly with the rise in popularity of people listening to things on earbuds or other headphones.
Yeah.
It's really like listening under a microscope, and it's frankly made us better at our jobs, because we would typically mix, if it's a television commercial, we'd mix it so it sounds good on a television. But these days, somebody's just as likely to be watching that spot or watching that show on their computer or their tablet with earphones on.
Yeah.
And we've got a mix for that environment, which is so much more revealing.
I know that we're all dealing with a lot these days, so I really wanted to acknowledge those that have gone out of their way to leave an honest review of this podcast. Like Gregory, who writes, "More. There is more to branding and marketing. Thanks to Audio Branding for introducing me to the world of audio and sound. Love it." Thanks, Gregory. I appreciate the listen and the kind words. And for those of you that are interested, you can also leave a voice review now off of the main podcast page. It's super simple and fun, and I'd love to hear what you think. Now, back to the show. There's a lot that goes into this. I mean, we're probably only touching the surface here, I know, but where do you see this going in the future? Because this is, it's getting bigger all the time. I think a lot more people are talking about it now just because we're so overloaded with everything else.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's so much clutter. And, well, clutter is actually an appropriate word to use here, because I think that one thing that I believe we're going to see much more of in probably the fairly near future is hyper-targeted out-of-home advertising. So, out-of-home, if you're not an advertising nerd, that's like a billboard or, things like that. Not an ad that's served to you on your television or radio necessarily, but just something that's out there in the wild. So directional sound technology is improving to the point now where we can aim a narrow beam of sound physically pointed at someone and deliver audio to them without it being audible to the people around them.
I love this. Steve Keller mentioned this in one of his TEDx talks because he was talking about a brand of banana where if you stood on one particular spot in the grocery store, it would tell you from above you exactly why you should buy that particular brand of banana.
Man, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I'll
he
have
was
to
talking
check
about
that out.
like years ago.
Wow. And it's surprising that we don't see more of that, but I think
it's expensive, to implement.
You're right. You're right. One of the applications where you do see this already is in museums. You're standing in front of one painting and it's giving you the background of that artist or whatever. So that's happening already, and using as you referenced, the technology is getting better and less expensive.
That's
and
the
using
key.
that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Using ultrasound, now we can not only aim tightly and narrow that down, but we can also project many times farther than typical sound projection that's in the normal sonic hearing range would allow.
Wow.
So it's gotten better and better, especially in just the last couple of years. So of course now it's being monetized, and I think the banana example is a great example, and sort of like, why the hell isn't this being deployed more? And I think you're right. It's just been the cost. But now that the cost is starting to come down, advertising is the obvious application. As soon as we find a new technology, somebody's going to make porn with it, and somebody's going to advertise with it. We know that.
One or the other, or both.
Or both.
That's how we humans work.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I'm curious as to what you would use that sonic projection that goes further for. Like,
well, I could imagine in, let's say it's again, let's go back to the grocery store example. If you don't want to go to the expense of having one ultrasonic speaker array over the bananas, and another one over the dairy case, and another one over by the cereal aisle, you could theoretically install one unit that is in some central location on the ceiling with line of sight, because that's really all you need is line of sight. Mm-hmm. And with ultrasound, you don't even necessarily need that. One unit that could be pivoting and targeting, responding to motion sensors. When somebody steps into this area, it shoots over to the dairy case and delivers a 6-second message there. Mm-hmm. Pivots over to the meat aisle and so on.
They kind of do this. This is going to sound very strange, but they kind of do this in washrooms, like in restrooms. And the reason I even mention this is because if you go into like one of those things on the wall type of restaurants, a lot of them in their restrooms will have targeted almost like mirrors on the wall,
right,
that have these ads that play by motion sensors, right?
Yes,
but you have to be standing in a particular place to see and hear them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually really interesting how this has been going on for years. So yeah. I mean, it's fascinating where all of this can go.
It really is.
I mean, I wonder if it might scare some people. There's this voice coming out of nowhere.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's where so many great technology ideas come from, or spawned from science fiction. And that's often the hallmark of a dystopian oligarchy where we're all ruled by advertisers.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. But I mean, like, even the communicators from Star Trek, I mean, like, that's where our phones came from.
Totally.
Totally. In fact, Samsung even has a flip phone now. Like an actual, like, it has a regular screen, but you can like fold it in two.
Yeah.
And it looks exactly.
Totally. Beam me up.
Yeah. It's really funny. And it amuses me to no end that it took to this year for that to actually happen. I just think it's funny.
We've caught up to 1960 technology in sci-fi.
It's just really funny to me. But yeah, anyway, that's a little off topic, but yeah. But this has been really educational and fascinating, Eric. I really appreciate your being here. Can you let people know how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. You can, probably the easiest way is just visit our website. It's coupestudios.com. It's COUPE, studios, plural.com. You can email me from there. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's another good way to do it. You will not find me on any other social. I have 3 kids. So
you're busy.
That's, I am busy.
I get it. Yeah. Yeah, totally get it. That is great. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I really appreciate your taking the time.
No, thank you for having me on, and thank you for producing this podcast and having so many great guests on. I'm a huge fan, and really appreciate what you're doing to elevate the industry in general and educate people about sound. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a passion, as it is yours too, I'm
Indeed
sure.
it is.
Thanks.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.